Speaking Myanmar, lessons for English-speaking learners, the verb particle for to want. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use the word to want in Myanmar, to say you want to do something or you just want something. And it's different than the way you learned in English, so it's going to take some getting used to. You'll learn where to place this particle in both an affirmative, a positive, and a negative sentence. Lastly, you'll learn the word that's closest to the English verb for to want. So let's get started. Let's first look at how we use the word want in English. It's classified as a verb, an action word. So in this first example, I want to go to the park. The verb want is combined with a verb infinitive, to go. Now we often do that. We combine the word want with another verb preceded by the word to, because we want to do something. There, I just used it. So for instance, I want to read the book. Again, want is combined with to do something, in this case, read. Or, I want to eat with them, where to eat is the verb infinitive. But our last example is a little different. I want a new car. Now, want is the only verb in the sentence in English. And that's because you don't want to do something, you merely want something. Now let's see how we would say all of this in Myanmar. While the word want is a verb in English, in Myanmar it's a particle, and that's just a piece of speech that can't be used on its own. It has to be combined with a word. This particle is a verb particle, so it has to be combined with a verb. It's pronounced chin or jin, depending on the sound of the syllable that comes before. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. So let me show you how to use it. I'm going to use the first three phrases we began with to show you where to put this particle in a sentence. Now these are the want to sentences, want to do something. To simplify things, I'm going to make them all present tense, since verbs aren't conjugated in Myanmar. I just want you to focus on how this particle is combined with the verb. Now in this first sentence, let's just consider the phrase want to go. In Myanmar, what's the verb in this sentence? It's to go. Remember, want is not a verb. So the verb in this sentence is to go. And the Myanmar word for to go is dwa. Now want is the verb particle you're going to add to the verb. Where will you put it? Well, it's a suffix, so it goes right after the verb. But notice, we can't end it without the final particle de, which means it's an affirmative statement. I do want to go. Now in the second sentence, the verb is to read. And in Myanmar, that verb is pronounced pat. Once again, we add the suffix for want along with the final particle. And we would say it, pat chin de. But why is the particle now pronounced chin instead of jin? Well, as I've covered in an earlier lesson, if the syllable that comes before ends with a stop tone, then it's pronounced with that CH sound, an aspirated pronunciation. In the third sentence, the verb is to eat, and in Myanmar, that word is sa. Adding the want particle followed by the affirmative particle, we get sa jinde. But now, let's look at how you would say you don't want to do something, a negative statement. I don't want to go. You still keep the verb and the verb particle joined together. Then, as I've covered in another lesson, the negative particles are wrapped around the combination, but the main point here is that the verb and verb particle stay connected. Now let's take a look at our fourth statement. I want a new car. Now in English, what's the verb in this sentence? In English, it's want. But remember, the word for want in Myanmar isn't a verb. It's a particle that has to be combined with a verb. So what do we have to do? We have to add a verb. And that verb is lo. And literally it means need. Next, we add that particle for want. And basically, by saying lo jinde, we're saying literally we need, want something. But that's really the closest equivalent to the English word want. Now just a word of caution. Be careful not to confuse lo jinde with lo chinde, because that means you want to do something. Now after considering all of this, you might see why for an English speaker, saying you want something or you want to do something is going to take some getting used to. Well, now let's review what you've learned. In review then, the word for want in Myanmar is not a verb, but a verb particle that has to be combined with a verb. It's placed immediately following the verb, but before the final particle, whether it's a positive, affirmative, or negative statement. To create a verb that's the closest equivalent to the English verb for to want, you combine the verb for to need with the particle want. You end up with lo jinde. And that finishes this lesson.